Day's boots made a soft thud as he stepped off the old transport shuttle. The metal floor of station Kepler 9 felt cold, even through his worn shoes. He looked around the busy docking bay and took a deep breath. This was it, his last chance. He reached into his jacket pocket and felt the small credit chip. 12 credits. That was all he had left in the entire galaxy. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. The smell of fried food from a nearby vendor made his mouth water, but he couldn't afford even the cheapest meal. The jacket he wore used to belong to his father. It was too big for him now, hanging loose around his thin frame. The fabric was faded and had small tears near the elbows. His mother had tried to patch them before he left Earth, but you could still see where the repairs had been made. In his other pocket, the data pad felt heavy like a brick. He knew exactly what was on it without looking. Rejection letter after rejection letter. Every shipping company, every cargo hauler, every transport service in 3 different systems had turned him down. Some were polite about it, others just sent automated responses that felt like a slap in the face. Not enough experience, they all said. Come back when you have more flight hours. But how could he get experience if no one would hire him? It was like being trapped in a circle with no way out. Day walked through the station's main corridor, past shops selling things he couldn't afford, and restaurants where families sat together sharing meals. He tried not to look too long at the food. His stomach was already complaining enough. The residential section was deeper inside the station, away from all the noise and bright lights. Here the walls were plain grey metal and the lighting was dimmer to save power. He passed several rental offices, but the prices in their windows made his heart sink. Even the smallest rooms cost more than he could make in months. Finally, he found it. A small office with a simple sign that read, Zilth Property Management, in both human writing and strange alien symbols that looked like twisted branches. Through the window, he could see someone moving around inside. Day pushed open the door and heard a little bell ring above his head. The office was small and neat, with a metal desk and 2 chairs. Behind the desk sat the strangest being he had ever seen. She was tall, taller than any human, with smooth purple skin that seemed to shimmer under the lights. 4 eyes, each the size of a human fist, looked at him from different angles. Her head was shaped like an upside-down triangle, and 2 long antennae moved slowly back and forth above her forehead. She wore a simple grey uniform with her name written on a badge. Zilth. You need room? She asked. Her voice sounded like rocks grinding together, but Day could understand her perfectly. The translation device in his ear was working fine. Yes, Day said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. I'm looking for something cheap, very cheap. Zilth's 4 eyes studied him from head to toe. She noticed his worn clothes, the way he stood with his shoulders hunched, and the nervous way he kept touching his pocket. She had seen hundreds of humans over the years, and she could always tell the desperate ones. Cheapest unit is 200. Credits per cycle, she said, watching his face carefully. Payment in advance, no exceptions. Day felt his heart drop into his stomach. 200 credits might as well have been 2 million. He had 12. 12 credits that wouldn't even buy him a decent meal. I don't have 200 credits, he said quietly. Then you need different office, Zilth replied, but she didn't look away from him. Something about this human was different. Most of them would argue or beg or try to negotiate. This one just stood there, accepting what she had told him. Wait, Day said as she started to turn back to her computer. I have 12 credits and something else. Zilth's antennae stopped moving. What else? I can work, I can fix things, clean things, maintain things. I'm good with tools and machines. My hands are steady and I learn fast. The alien landlady had never heard this offer before. In 30 years of renting rooms to different species from across the galaxy, no one had ever offered to pay with labor instead of money. Her people, the Vorthak, valued efficiency above everything else. They worked to earn credits, then used credits to buy what they needed. Simple, clean, logical. But humans were known for being unpredictable. They did strange things that didn't make sense to other species. They kept pets that served no purpose. They made art that had no function. They told stories that weren't true just for entertainment. You fix things? Zilth asked, her voice carrying a note of curiosity that she tried to hide. I fix everything, Day said, and for the first time since arriving on the station, he smiled. My grandfather taught me that there's no such thing as broken, only things that haven't been understood yet. The first morning, Day woke up before the station's artificial dawn cycle began. His room was tiny, barely big enough for a bed and a small desk, but it was his. He had spent the night on the hard mattress, listening to strange sounds echoing through the walls. Other tenants talking in languages he didn't recognize, the hum of machinery keeping the station alive, and somewhere in the distance, a rhythmic banging that never stopped. He found his toolbox exactly where he had left it, beside his bed. It wasn't much to look at, old dented with scratches covering every surface, but inside were tools that had belonged to 3 generations of his family. His great-grandfather had used them to build houses on Earth. His grandfather had carried them to the first colony worlds. His father had maintained starships with them. Now they were his. The banging sound was coming from Block C. Day followed the noise down a narrow corridor until he found its source. A large machine built into the E wall was shaking violently, making the entire section vibrate. A sign next to it read, Air Recycler Unit 7, but someone had crossed out the 7 and written broken underneath. Day opened the maintenance panel and looked inside. The problem was obvious once he saw it. A bearing had worn out months ago, maybe longer. The whole unit was trying to work with parts that were grinding against each other. No wonder it sounded like it was dying. He spent the next 6 hours taking the machine apart piece by piece. Some parts were too damaged to save, but he found ways to repair others. A worn gear could be filed down and rebalanced. A cracked housing could be welded back together. By evening, the air recycler was running smoothly and quietly. Word spread quickly among the residents. The human in the small room had fixed something that had been broken for months. People started stopping by his room, asking if he could look at their broken appliances or faulty door locks. On the second day, Day tackled the lighting in the common areas. Half the panels were dark, making the corridors dim and unwelcoming. The other half flickered constantly, giving everyone headaches. He traced the wiring through the walls and found a mess of temporary fixes and bypasses that had been stacked on top of each other over the years. Instead of just replacing the broken parts, Day rewired the entire system from scratch. He rerouted power through unused conduits, installed new junction boxes, and balanced the load properly. When he flipped the switch, the corridors blazed with steady, bright light for the first time in years. The third day brought the water pressure problem. In some rooms, the water barely trickled from the faucets. In others, it came out with such force that it splashed everywhere. Day spent hours crawling through maintenance tunnels, checking every pipe and valve in the residential section. The problem wasn't just one thing. It was dozens of small issues that had built up over time. Partially blocked filters, pressure regulators set wrong, pipes that had been patched but never properly repaired. Day fixed each problem as he found it, working his way through the entire system methodically. By the end of the week, every resident in the section had consistent water pressure. Showers that had been useless for years now worked perfectly. Sinks filled quickly and evenly. The laundry facilities, which had been practically abandoned, were suddenly usable again. Zilth noticed the changes immediately. She had owned this property for 15 years and had grown used to constant complaints from tenants. Broken this, faulty that, not working properly. But suddenly, the complaints stopped. Instead, tenants were thanking her for the improvements. She started checking on Day's work, telling herself it was just good business practice. She needed to make sure he wasn't damaging anything or creating new problems. But every time she looked, she found work that was better than professional contractors would have done. The human didn't just fix what was broken. He looked at everything around it and made it better. When he repaired a ventilation fan, he also cleaned the ducts and adjusted the airflow. When he fixed a door lock, he also lubricated the hinges and adjusted the frame so it closed properly. One evening, Zilth was doing her rounds when she heard hammering coming from inside a ventilation shaft. She looked up and saw Day's legs sticking out of an access panel in the ceiling. Tools and parts were scattered on the floor below him. "What are you doing up there?" she called out. His voice came back muffled and echoing. "The fan motor is wearing out. I'm installing a new bearing assembly before it fails completely." No one complained about that fan. Not yet, but they would have in about 2 weeks when it seized up. Zilth was puzzled. Her people fixed things when they broke. They didn't waste time and resources preventing problems that might never happen. "Why do you work so much?" she asked. There was a pause and she could hear him moving around inside the ductwork. "My grandfather used to say that if you're going to do something, do it so well that people remember your name." The alien landlady stood there in the corridor, thinking about those words. In her 30 years of business, she had never heard a human philosophy that made sense before. Her people worked efficiently, doing exactly what was required and nothing more. But this human worked like he was building something permanent, something that would last long after he was gone. Maybe that was why humans had spread across the galaxy faster than any other species. They didn't just survive, they improved everything they touched. Hannah had been traveling for 3 weeks to reach station Kepler 9. The last message she received from her brother was months ago, just a brief note saying he had found work and a place to stay. She worried about him constantly. Day had always been the dreamer in their family, the one who believed he could fix anything and make friends with anyone. When she stepped off the transport, she asked around for him. Most people didn't know any humans by that name, but finally, an old Centauri merchant pointed her toward the residential section. "Check with the purple lady," he said. "She knows all the humans who live there." Hannah found the property management office easily enough, but when she looked through the window, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her brother was standing next to the alien landlady, both of them bent over a workbench. The alien had 4 arms, and she was using all of them to hold different parts while Day showed her something on a small device. "No," Day was saying patiently. "You have to feel it click into place. The sonic welder won't work properly if the resonance chamber isn't aligned exactly right." Zilth's purple fingers moved carefully, adjusting tiny screws, while her 4 eyes focused on the tool from different angles. "Like this?" she asked, her grinding voice softer than usual. "Perfect," Day said, and Hannah could hear the smile in his voice. "Now try welding those 2 pieces of scrap metal." The alien activated the tool, and a bright blue beam connected 2 chunks of metal on the workbench. When she turned it off, the pieces had fused together seamlessly. Zilth's antennae wiggled with what Hannah would later learn was excitement. "It works much better now," Zilth said. "Human tools are very precise." "They have to be," Day replied. "We don't have 4 arms like you do, so we make tools that do more of the work for us." Hannah pushed open the door, and both of them looked up. Day's face lit up with surprise and joy when he saw her. "Hannah, what are you doing here?" He rushed over and hugged her tightly. "Looking for my little brother who disappeared into space," she said, squeezing him back. "Mom is worried sick about you." "I'm fine," Day said, stepping back so she could see him properly. He looked healthier than when she had last seen him, less thin and worried. His clothes were still old, but they were clean and had been mended properly. "I have work and a place to live." Zilth watched this reunion with interest. She had never seen humans interact with their family members before. The female was shorter than Day, but shared the same dark hair and quick movements. Her 4 eyes noted the way they stood close together and spoke in rapid, overlapping sentences. "Zilth, this is my sister Hannah," Day said. "Hannah, this is Zilth. She's my landlady and—" He paused as if looking for the right word. "My business partner, I guess." Business partner. Hannah raised an eyebrow. This was not what she had expected to find. That evening, Day cooked dinner for both of them in his small room. The cooking unit was tiny, barely big enough for 1 pot, but he managed to make a decent meal from synthesized ingredients. The rice wasn't quite like the real thing from Earth, but it was close enough to make Hannah feel homesick. "Tell me about her," Hannah said, settling cross-legged on the floor since there was only 1 chair. Day stirred the rice thoughtfully. "She's not like the other aliens I've met. Most of them see humans as either useful or annoying, nothing in between. But Zilth actually listens when I explain things. She wants to understand how things work, not just use them." "And you're teaching her to use human tools?" she asked me to. Said her people's tools are efficient but not precise enough for detailed repair work. Human tools were designed by people who had to make do with less, so they're more versatile. Hannah watched her brother's face as he talked. She had seen him passionate about his work before, but this was different. He seemed calmer, more settled. "She pays you well?" "She pays me enough. But it's not really about the money anymore." Day served the rice into 2 bowls and handed one to his sister. "For the first time in my life, someone appreciates the way I work. She doesn't just want me to fix things fast and cheap, she wants me to fix them right." The next morning, Hannah decided to observe this unusual partnership more closely. She found Zilth in her office, carefully organizing a set of human-made precision instruments that definitely hadn't been there the day before. "You bought new tools," Hannah observed. Zilth's antennae twitched. "Your brother showed me how much better the work is with proper equipment. It is logical to invest in quality tools." But Hannah noticed other things too. The way Zilth's eyes tracked Day's movements when he entered a room. How she had started keeping a pot of the herbal tea that Day liked on her desk. The small human-sized chair that had appeared next to her workbench. "You've never had a human employee before, have you?" Hannah asked. "No," Zilth admitted. "Most humans are unpredictable. They do things that serve no logical purpose, but your brother—" She paused, searching for the right words. "He makes things better than they were before. Not just functional. Better." That afternoon, Hannah watched them work together on replacing a malfunctioning environmental control unit. Day would explain each step as he worked, and Zilth would ask questions that showed she was really thinking about the answers. When Day needed tools, Zilth would hand them over before he asked. When Zilth couldn't reach a tight space, Day would guide her hands to the right position. They moved around each other like they had been working together for years, not months. "Brother," Hannah said that evening as they shared another simple meal, "I think your landlady might be becoming your friend." Day was quiet for a moment, considering this. "I think you might be right," he said finally. "Is that strange?" "Everything about this situation is strange," Hannah laughed. "But strange doesn't mean wrong. She seems to genuinely care about you." "She does," Day agreed. "And I care about her too. She gave me a chance when no one else would." Hannah smiled at her brother. Maybe he really had found where he belonged after all. The sound cut through Day's dreams like a knife. 3 sharp blasts, then a pause, then 3 more. Emergency klaxons. He rolled out of bed before his eyes were fully open, his body reacting to the alarm even while his mind was still catching up. Red lights flashed in his small room, casting everything in an eerie glow. The station's emergency lighting system had kicked in automatically. Through his thin walls, he could hear other residents stirring, confused voices asking what was happening. Then came the voice over the communication system. "Station administrator." Crix, a calm Vulcan who never showed emotion, sounded genuinely worried. "All residents remain in quarters. We have suffered major damage to primary power systems. Repeat, all residents remain in quarters until further notice." Day was already pulling on his work clothes. Something in the administrator's voice told him this wasn't a drill or a minor problem. He grabbed his emergency toolkit and stepped into the corridor. The hallway was filled with confused residents in sleep clothes, speaking in dozens of different languages. Some were panicking, others were trying to get information from their personal communication devices. The emergency lighting made everyone look strange and ghostly. "Die!" Hannah appeared at his side, still in her sleeping clothes but wide awake. "What's going on?" "I don't know yet, but it's bad," he replied, already moving toward the central corridor. "The power systems are failing." They made their way through crowds of worried people toward the main administrative section. Through the large viewing windows, Day could see something that made his stomach drop. A massive cargo hauler, easily the size of a city block, was embedded in the side of the station. Debris floated around it like a deadly cloud, and sparks were shooting from damaged systems. The administrator's voice came over the speakers again, but this time the transmission was breaking up with static. "Main power coupling destroyed. Backup systems failing. Need emergency repair crews." Day found Administrator Crix in the emergency command center, surrounded by station engineers and maintenance staff. The Vulcan's usually perfect uniform was rumpled, and his 6 eyes darted between multiple display screens showing system failures throughout the station. "Sir," Day said, approaching the group, "I'm here to help. One of the engineers, a tall centauri with silver skin, looked at him dismissively. "This is not work for a human. These are complex systems that require—" "The primary grid is completely severed," Crix interrupted, his voice tight with stress. "We need someone to crawl through the emergency access tunnels, to manually reset the breakers, and reroute power through the backup conduits." The engineer who had dismissed Day suddenly looked uncomfortable. "Sir, those tunnels are barely 2 feet wide. None of our people can fit through them wearing safety equipment." "What about maintenance drones?" another engineer suggested. "The electromagnetic interference from the crash is blocking all remote signals," Crix replied. "We need someone to do it manually." Day stepped forward. "I can do it." Everyone in the room turned to look at him. The Centauri engineer shook his head. "Impossible. You would need to wear a full environmental suit, and even then the spaces are too confined. It would take hours, and the radiation levels— How long do we have before life support fails completely?" Day asked Crix directly. The administrator checked his displays. 8 hours, maybe 10 if we're lucky. "Then we don't have time to debate," Day said. "Get me a suit." 20 minutes later, Day was sealed inside an environmental suit that felt like wearing a thick, clumsy blanket. The helmet limited his vision, and the air recycler made everything sound hollow and distant. But he had studied the station schematics, and he knew exactly where he needed to go. The first access tunnel was behind a maintenance panel near the residential section. Day removed the cover and looked into a passage that seemed impossibly small. With the bulky suit on, he would have maybe 6 inches of clearance on all sides. "Testing communication," he said into his helmet microphone. "We hear you clearly," came Crix's voice. "First breaker panel is 50 meters ahead, then turn left." Day took a deep breath and crawled into the tunnel. The next 8 hours became a blur of cramped spaces, sparking electrical panels, and the constant fear that the tunnel might collapse around him. The suit made everything harder. He couldn't feel the tools properly through the thick gloves, and the helmet kept fogging up from his breath. But he kept moving. Panel by panel, breaker by breaker, he worked his way through the station's emergency systems. Some sections required him to crawl on his belly for hundreds of meters. Others forced him to squeeze through gaps so tight that he had to exhale completely just to fit through. The station groaned and shuddered around him constantly. Damaged sections settling, metal expanding and contracting as systems failed and restarted. Several times the tunnel walls pressed against his suit so tightly that he thought he might get stuck forever. Halfway through, his suit's cooling system started overheating. Sweat poured down his face, and his breathing became labored. But he could hear the worry in Crix's voice over the radio, reporting that more systems were failing every hour. "Life support is down to 60%, the administrator reported during Day's 6th hour in the tunnels. "Environmental controls are failing in sections 7 through 12. Day forced himself to move faster, even though his muscles screamed in protest. He had been crawling, climbing, and squeezing through tight spaces for hours, and his body was beginning to shut down from exhaustion. The final breaker panel was the hardest to reach. It was located in a section where 3 major conduits came together, creating a space barely wide enough for a human body. Day had to remove his helmet to fit through, working in the cramped space while holding his breath. His hands shook as he made the final connection. Sparks flew from the panel, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, lights began coming back on throughout the station. When Day finally crawled out of the last access tunnel, he was covered in coolant fluid, hydraulic oil, and his own sweat. His suit was torn in several places, and he could barely stand. But behind him, he could hear the sound of air recyclers humming back to life. Zilth was waiting for him in the maintenance bay, along with Hana and Administrator Crix. The alien landlady's 4 eyes looked him up and down, taking in his exhausted state and damaged equipment. "The administrator offered you a permanent position," she said without preamble. Day nodded weakly, too tired to speak. "Full housing allowance, medical benefits, pension plan." "I know," he managed to say. "It's a good offer. Any logical person would accept it immediately." Day looked at her, seeing something in her expression that he couldn't quite identify. But you told him you would think about it." Zilth's antennae moved slowly. A sign he had learned meant she was thinking carefully. "Why would you think about it?" Day smiled, despite his exhaustion. "Because I like our arrangement. I like working with someone who understands why things matter." For the first time since he had known her, Zilth's rigid posture relaxed slightly. "That is not a logical answer." "No," Day agreed, "but it's a human one." The morning sun simulation was just beginning its cycle when Day stood outside the property office, admiring the new sign. The letters were crisp and professional, carved into polished metal that gleamed under the artificial lighting. Zilth and Associates Property Management, written in 3 languages, Vorthak script that looked like twisted branches, Korean characters. That reminded him of home and standard galactic that everyone could read. 6 months ago he had been a broke human with nothing but 12 credits and a toolbox. Now he was a business partner with his name on a sign, well, sort of his name. Associates wasn't exactly Day, but it felt right somehow. The office had changed too. What used to be a cramped single room was now a proper business space. They had knocked through the wall to the adjacent unit, creating separate areas for customer service, planning, and a workshop where they could demonstrate repair techniques to potential clients. The workshop was Day's favorite part. It had every tool he could dream of, plus several that Zilth had designed specifically for cross-species repair work. "You're here early again," Zilth said, entering through the back door with a steaming cup of the bitter tea she preferred. Her morning routine now included brewing a pot of the mild herbal blend that Day liked, though she would never admit it was specifically for him. "Couldn't sleep," Day replied, settling at his desk with the maintenance schedule spread across multiple data tablets. "The Meridian Station contract is bigger than anything we've handled before. 12 residential blocks, plus commercial spaces and 3 docking bays." Zilth's 4 eyes scanned the paperwork over his shoulder. "You are worried we cannot handle it?" "Not worried exactly, just it's a lot of responsibility. If we mess this up, word will spread fast." But they hadn't messed anything up yet. Their reputation had grown steadily over the past months, built on a simple promise: they would make things work better than before. Other property management companies just maintained the status quo, fixing things when they broke and doing the minimum required by regulations. Zilth and Associates improved everything they touched. Their first big break had come when Captain Yuki, a human trader, had heard about their work from other residents on Kepler 9. Her mixed-species crew needed housing on 3 different stations along their regular route. Most landlords saw mixed crews as problems: different atmospheric requirements, incompatible social customs, constant complaints about things not working properly for their specific biology. But Day had an idea. Instead of trying to make everyone adapt to standard accommodations, why not adapt the accommodations to the people living in them? He spent a week with Captain Yuki's crew, learning about their needs. The Zenthari engineer needed higher humidity and dim lighting. The Korthek medic required specialized air filtration because of sensitive respiratory membranes. The human pilot wanted a kitchen where she could cook real food instead of surviving on nutrient paste. When they delivered the finished apartments, every crew member had exactly what they needed. More importantly, everything worked perfectly, together. The humidity system for the Zenthari didn't interfere with the air filtration for the Korthek. The kitchen ventilation was integrated with both. It was complex engineering made to look simple. Word spread quickly through the trading networks. Within a month, they had requests from 5 different mixed-species crews. By the 3rd month, they were booked solid and had a waiting list. "Why? Council wants to interview us," Zilth announced one morning, waving an elegant invitation printed on expensive paper. The seal at the bottom marked it as official correspondence from the Galactic Commerce Council, the organization that regulated trade and business practices across 17 systems. Day looked up from the duty roster he was organizing. "Interview us for what?" "They want to study our innovative cross-species partnership model," Zilth read from the invitation. "Apparently, we are the first human Vorthak business partnership to achieve this level of success." "What did you tell them?" Zilth set the invitation on her desk and considered the question carefully. "I told them that humans taught me something my people had forgotten, which is, That sometimes the best business decision is trusting someone who will never quit on you. Day felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the herbal tea. You think I'll never quit? You crawled through 8 hours of maintenance tunnels when the station was dying. You could have taken the administrator's job and never looked back. But you stayed. Her antenna moved in what he had learned was the Vorthak equivalent of a smile. Humans are stubborn in ways that seem illogical, but produce excellent results. The interview with the council was scheduled for the following week, but Dai wasn't nervous about it anymore. Let them study their partnership model. Let them try to understand how a broke human and a logical alien had built something successful together. Their success had attracted attention from stations as far away as the Outer Rim. The communication system chimed constantly with new requests. Could they manage a residential complex on Titan Base? Would they consider a consulting contract for the new colony on Kepler 442b? A mining station in the asteroid belt needed someone who could handle both the technical challenges and the diverse workforce. Hana had decided to stay and help manage the growing business. She handled the paperwork and scheduling that Dai found tedious, freeing him to focus on the technical work he loved. She also served as translator when human customs needed explaining to alien clients, or when Zilth's direct communication style needed softening for sensitive situations. "We're going to need more help soon," Hana said one afternoon, reviewing their project timeline. "There's no way the three of us can handle all these contracts." "I have been thinking about that," Zilth replied. "There are other partnerships like ours forming across the sector. Humans working with different species, finding new ways to solve old problems." Day looked up from the ventilation system he was calibrating. "You want to franchise the business?" "Not franchise. Train. We could teach other partnerships our methods, help them avoid our early mistakes." It was an ambitious idea, but then again 6 months ago the idea of a human and a Vorthak working together had seemed impossible too. Now they were proof that different species could complement each other in ways that made both stronger. As Day worked on the ventilation system, listening to Hana and Zilth plan their expansion, he thought about his grandfather's words. "If you're going to do something, do it so well that people remember your name." People across 17 systems now knew the name Zilth and Associates. They knew it meant quality work, innovative solutions, and the kind of service that made life better for everyone involved. Not bad for a human who started with 12 credits and a dream.